Welcome to our panel, Promoting Security in a 5G World. I am Justin Perkins. I'm the manager of Cybersecurity and Policy at CTIA. And this panel is the end of the Everything Policy program, so we're going to try to end with some energy since we're in mid-afternoon here. Woo! And thank you. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, but I first want to set the stage for our discussion. And in our world today, cyber threats have become increasingly sophisticated and pervasive, and the wireless industry has been a leader in protecting our networks. This afternoon, we will examine the track record of the wireless industry, the significance of public-private partnerships in enhancing our cybersecurity posture, and the regulatory and policy priorities that lie ahead. So with us, we have Jason Olson, the Director of Global Public Policy at AT&T. We have Alexa Lee, the Cyber and Data Policy Lead of Global Government Affairs at Qualcomm. We also have Todd Warble, Vice President of Solution Architecture at SecureG. And we have Jason Boswell, Vice President and Head of End-to-End Security at Ericsson North America. So I'm excited to have you all here. Let's get started. So, Jason Boswell, we'll start with you since you're the furthest away from me.
All right.
In recent years, we've seen cybersecurity risks and cyber attacks growing in complexity and sophistication. Can we start by sharing with the audience what the wireless sector as an industry has been doing to address this evolving threat landscape?
Of course. So the way you introduced that, you were talking about like what's a track record been, right? To me, that sounds kind of like a report card. We got a grade. What did we get as a grade so far? So when I think about what's the report card for the industry so far, I'd say we get a solid A, not an A+, because I'm a tough critic, but still a solid A, and maybe in the teacher's notes on the column on the right, it would say, works well with others. And that's really what it's been all about for the past few years, getting ready and then implementing and rolling out 5G. It's about collaboration. So some of the achievements that we've had have been initiatives with public-private partnerships like the DHS Supply Chain Risk Management Task Force, the recent work that's been done with NIST in getting the next Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 ready to go, right? Work with CISA and the FCC in different initiatives like the CPGs from CISA, of course the FCC CISRIC, very important, and that's always a fun thing to work on, so we just wrapped up CISRIC 8 for the most part. And lastly, kind of the thing we've actually built is the 5G security testbed. This has been kind of a really unique collaboration between Ericsson, CTIA, MITRE, T-Mobile, US Cellular, AT&T, SecureG, and the University of Maryland. Kind of a who's who in the industry, if you will. And we built a first-of-its-kind real-world environment where we can test and prove out and validate all of the things that we pontificate about in a CISRIC, say, well, this is really how you should build a network. Well, prove it, right? Go prove it in a real network with radio equipment in a Faraday cage and a real core, a real transport in between them, put up calls, and then test it and see if it actually holds water. And so far, it's been a really great initiative. We've had other countries and governments and all kinds of different folks reaching out to get more info about the testbed. So that's 5gsecuritytestbed.com if you want to look it up and find out for yourself. But I think that's really been kind of the hallmark of the what does working well together look like. Try to go build a real working lab together and then break it on purpose. And that's been a challenge. So I'm really proud of the work that everybody's done on that and that the industry has done just to get us to this point in 5G in the US.
Great. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Now I'll turn to you, Jason Olson. What are you seeing that the industry is doing to address the cybersecurity threat landscape?
Yeah, so I think in the previous Gs, security was a bit of a bolt-on, like, hey, we want to get this out the door. Let's push out the standards. And that security was maybe an afterthought. I think with 5G and certainly with the next G Alliance coming for 6G, is cybersecurity was built in at the front end, which we should all feel good about because as we move to 5G, it wasn't a bolt-on, it wasn't an afterthought, it was in from the beginning. And I think to reiterate a couple things that Jason said, CISRIC implementing the SA3 working group and the 3GP around cybersecurity, putting that into a real-world environment is, we should all feel good about that for everybody who has a mobile phone in their hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. What about you, Alexa? What are you seeing that the industry is doing to address this new landscape?
Sure. First of all, thank you for inviting Qualcomm to join this very important discussion. I will just quickly add on 5G. As every sector of the economy increasingly rely on the connected infrastructure and 5G, not just the IT sector, but every sector, managing risk in that dynamic and shifting landscape requires a collaborative approach. And also, there are a lot of positive use cases come with 5G, like smart transportation, smart agriculture, smart cities, etc. All of these are positive examples, but at the same time, they also broaden the threat surface, bringing more stakeholders into the collective shared responsibility of managing cybersecurity risks. So there are both challenges and opportunities. And on the technical side of things, we're also seeing increased capabilities in it. So for example, we're seeing enhanced encryption, better network monitoring, and achieving security economy of skills, especially in the cloud environment. And at Qualcomm, we're also very excited about the increased transparency and interoperability in 5G networks, especially those standards developed by the O-RAN Alliance. So there's certainly a lot of positive excitement, but also a lot of challenges as well on 5G security.
Yes, absolutely, and thanks. Yeah, and like you said, every sector is going to rely on 5G. I want to turn to you, Todd, as the solution architect for SecureG. How has your organization adapted to meet some of these challenges and prioritize network and customer security?
Yeah, no, it's actually a great question because the reality is that's why we were born. We're only a couple of years old. And really, SecureG was formed because the powers that be saw a network infrastructure that was coming, critical infrastructure that was going to be heavily virtualized and rely very heavily on APIs. And quite frankly, they didn't see a PKI solution out there that would suffice for actually securing this whole thing. And in our mind, it's a foundational component to any security framework that's being deployed. And it's a critical piece of zero trust, and all of these things moving forward, it's an excellent reason why we were actually put into play, and why we've joined things like the security test bed, participate pretty heavily in cybersecurity working group, because we want to see these policies and procedures moving along to the point where we can actually secure what is the most critical piece of our nation's infrastructure moving forward.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. So let's pivot to some of the key policy trends for the wireless industry. And I'm going to start with you again, Jason Boswell. So clearly, cybersecurity has been top of mind for industry and policymakers too. One big trend we've seen this year is a focus on cybersecurity incident reporting. And there are efforts regarding incident reporting across several agencies in the federal government, including the FCC, the SEC, the FTC, and CISA, and even at the state level. Could you discuss some of these emerging frameworks and their impact on the wireless sector?
Yeah, first of all, we need to keep the number below the amount of fingers on one hand, right? So we're at the threshold right now. We can't take any more, but it's really important. I think what it highlights is that from a government perspective, when you have that many agencies all leaning in on a topic, it means it's really important for everyone, and everybody's trying to kind of put their best foot forward in what's right for the country with that. So I applaud that effort. What we need to do is understand that in individual sectors of the critical infrastructure sectors, right, there's different responsibilities and different ways of reporting that information, and it's very important that we are careful not to overlap and conflict too much. Duplication is one thing, but actual conflicting arrangements would be problematic. I'll just give you an example. So from an Ericsson perspective, if we have an incident, our first two calls are to the operator and the FBI. And then we work together with them very closely on remediating and on reporting and investigation. The investigation phase is really important, and that's why there's like a separate window with the FBI and the DOJ with their approach to investigating and reporting. So if that window is inconsistent with others, like say from the SEC, then who wins, right? Those are the kinds of things that still need to be worked out, but that's why I would encourage government to seek input from different individual sectors and then different actors within that sectors that have different responsibilities and see where it hashes out. And I think they have made some of those steps to really lean in and ask us those questions. So that just needs to continue. I don't think we're quite there yet.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And certainly that some of that work needs to continue. What about you, Jason? How are you seeing the emerging frameworks impact on the wireless sector?
That Jason.
Oh, yes, Jason Olson.
Jason, AT&T, the operator, Jason. Well, AT&T certainly understands the need for incident reporting. And, we actually expect to greatly benefit from it. When you're pooling all of these incidents, SIS is triaging them and putting them back out for us, the rest of us to consume, we expect to benefit from this. But as a very large network operator, we're also concerned with how you define incident. Because I'm having a security incident right now. This second I'm having a security incident, but depending upon how you define security incidents, it will determine whether I report it. So maybe I send you 1 million incidents a day, or maybe I send you 0, depending upon that definition. So getting this precise, which is why I'm glad we have so much time, or CISA has so much time to work on the rulemaking, because getting this right is very important, just from us sending them something actionable versus us sending something to them that they can't use. And I know we talked about the 5 agencies, but I have the privilege of dealing with all the states on this, and states are becoming more interested in this. So state public utility commissions or state department of emergency managers are asking for, hey, we want to know about these things too. And in my conversations with them, I ask them questions like, well, if I give it to you in 72 hours, are you going to help me fix it? And they're like, oh, no, we can't do that. And then I'm like, well, then why do you need it in 72 hours? And they're like, well, we just want to know. And it's like, well, in the middle of an incident, just wanting to know probably isn't the highest priority. Recovering and responding and hopefully helping our law enforcement partners deal with this is more important. So I would ask for kind of regulatory humility when it comes to incident reporting, and our hope is that CISA can act as kind of the clearinghouse for these things and push it out through the ISACs to get people information that's beneficial to them but doesn't slow down response times.
Right. So, and I really like what you said, Jason, about how all of these efforts are ongoing, and I want to turn to you. I want to turn to you, Todd, because all of these efforts are overlapping, and the White House has made a point to prioritize regulatory harmonization under the National Cybersecurity Strategy. Specifically, the White House issued a request for information, an RFI, with comments due at the end of October to ask about harmonization. Now, last week, CERC, the Cyber Incident Reporting Council, released its recommendations to harmonize incident reporting requirements faced by critical infrastructure operators. And I'm wondering, Todd, what do you see as the path forward on harmonization? And if you could pick 1 or 2 steps that the federal government could take to relieve the negative effects of fragmentation, what would they be?
Yeah, I would say that's a tricky question. I guess for me, I've spent a couple of decades in this industry on the vendor side of things. I've never seen harmonization get motivated so well as by cash. Like that tends to work way better than regulating your way towards a single solution. So that's something that we've always focused on is, really, Jason was talking earlier about, security sometimes being a follow-on approach. And quite often, the solutions brought to the table were the ones that were being asked for, the ones that were being paid for. And quite frankly, when we saw the government go to a carrier and say, I need these 3 things, then all of a sudden the vendors are developing it, and next thing you know, that is the way forward. So I do see standards sometimes working by committee. You could say the same thing by regulation. There's also standards de facto, which just means it's the way we end up doing it because it ends up being the best way to do it. And quite often, when we're looking at it from a federal point of view, you see things like the DoD spending on 5G. You see things that's going on with WIF and CHIPS Act and things like that. These are excellent places to really tailor the behavior that they're looking to see long term, as opposed to regulating the way through, this is exactly how things should occur, because quite frankly, then the industry gets the legs to go and figure out how to do it best.
Right, yeah, thanks, Todd.
Can I quickly add on to that? So I just want to quickly add on the policy perspective. It's great that the government is recognizing the importance of regulatory harmonization, but also at the same time, we don't want to just harmonize for the sake of harmonize whatever is available out there. But instead, I think we should identify good security policy and activities and harmonize with that. But that approach, who determines what is good security policy will require a multi-stakeholder collaboration. But the request for information from the White House is definitely a welcome first step.
Right, yes, absolutely. I want to get your take, Jason Boswell, in responding to what Alexa just said, and not harmonizing, just for the sake of harmonization, but really prioritizing what would be important to industry.
Yeah, if I can get my kids to stop fighting with a little bit of cash incentive, that does work. However, if they just agree on they're going to do the same bad behavior together, that's not the right model, right? So how do we incentivize good behavior, best practices, right? We've seen what CISA has put out with the CPGs, the Cybersecurity Baseline Performance Goals, as well as the implementation plan from OECD. I think both of those have kind of pulled from some of the best practices that we see laid out in the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 and the changes that have gone on there. It's been really interesting kind of behind the scenes seeing how that's happening as we're involved with many of other people on the stage with helping to develop and comment on and edit those policies as they go. At the beginning of the year, we were really in a kind of a breaking ground phase, right? CISA was just putting out early drafts of the CPGs that really were a bit disparate from what NIST was doing with their early drafts of the CSF. We had some early conversations with OECD, and those were somewhat separate as well. Since then, now, through a lot of repeat meetings and working together and workshopping, we've now ended up kind of at almost like that's kind of the three-legged stool now for critical infrastructure. It's the OECD implementation plan, it's the CISA CPGs, and it's the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is a voluntary best practice-based approach. So that gives you something that's really consumable and understandable. The CISA CPGs are a bit more specific, but they are targeted at their specific sectors. Next, we'll pivot to the sector-specific performance goals. And then you have the OECD, which has like kind of the nation-level interests in mind. So it's really been kind of a good mix of those three. I would just say don't add in a fourth, because then you have a very wobbly stool. Right now it feels pretty stable. So I think we're on good footing.
Great, that's great to hear. And I want to just double back to something that you said about NIST and the CSF, and because as you said, NIST has been going through the process of updating the cybersecurity framework. And could you just discuss the impact of the CSF 2.0 updates?
Well, I don't know that we'll see the real impact until when it's finalized next year. But already, I think people are pivoting towards kind of what's the most important thing, whether you're an enterprise or a carrier or a vendor, to be aware of. And we hear it a lot at CTI. We were talking last week, right, Justin, about governance and monitoring, right? You can't secure what you don't know, what you don't have visibility to. And that's really one of the main differences in the new CSF is governance. That's a whole new category now in the CSF. So I think just putting that out there and kind of firming up that governance and visibility into the network is just as important as all of the policies that you're putting in place. That's created like this mind shift now for people to go, oh, okay, I can't just write it all out on paper. It's not a paper security exercise now. It's tangible for people. So it's been productive.
Yes, absolutely. And as you said, the CSF 2.0 as an emerging baseline, and then also too CISA as an emerging baseline with the CPGs, as you said. Alexa, would you discuss the CPGs and kind of where things stand with the sector-specific cyber performance goals?
Sure. I think it's too early to tell how CISA plans to do with the CPG, and we're, of course, watching and following very closely. But because the efforts are so nascent and so new, I think our approach is hopefully the CPG will become a voluntary guidance first, because what makes the NIST CSF so successful is because of its flexibility. Right. So we would love to give the CPG some time and make sure that people learn and how to use it as a reference point and develop experience around it, and over time it could be successful. So we definitely want to be cautioned against any immediately the CPG becomes some kind of prescriptive approach. I think starting something from a voluntary approach and build experience, build consensus around it, following what makes the CSF so successful will be very critical.
Hey, Alexa, can I chime in on that? That just made me think of in the early days of the CSF, when we were first rolling out the 1.0 model, there was the concept of profiles. So first it was, here's the CSF, and everybody try and go implement it. And there was a bit of like, okay, do I have to? What's mandatory? What's not? How does this apply to me specifically? And then from that, the different SRMAs, the sector risk management agencies, worked with NIST to develop CSF profiles that were more targeted. Say, okay, for your sector, energy, for instance, here's how you go implement the CSF for you, and it's tailored. I think we're seeing a similar thing now with the CPGs and the sector-specific goals, but it took some time, for those profiles, that concept, number one, just to be written, but then to really catch on, because it requires a feedback loop from the sector to say, okay, well, that's a great idea for that profile, but this is what doesn't quite work for me. And now we've seen that really evolve, and the profiles are really powerful for different sectors. So I think we'll see the same thing with CISA.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, that's a good highlight on how helpful the profiles are. Anyone else want to comment on the CPGs and where we stand with the sector-specific goals?
Yeah, I'll actually comment if you don't mind. I mean, the one good thing for us, we're less concerned about regulating the way through it or mandating what's going to happen. For us, we're very excited to see some of the things they're drawing attention to. In particular, things like device identity, things like supply chain provenance. We're just glad to see these things get more and more publicity. We want to see this as a topic that needs to be discussed. We also saw CISA put out a software attestation form to be filled out by anybody providing services to the Fed space, and we want to see these things go digital. So we want to see things like provenance being burned in via S-bombs. We want to see H-bombs actually become a real thing, and we want to be able to identify and control, whether it's hardware or software, what gets to play in our network based on where it came from and whether or not it is truly trustworthy and it came from who we think it came from. So for us, it's a visibility thing. We're thrilled to see some of the things they're starting to talk about, and we're looking forward to see where it goes as well.
Excellent. Those are all great points. I want to pivot, Alexa, to the FCC, and this year, we've seen the FCC become more and more active on cybersecurity issues, from proposing rules to update its CP&I breach notification requirements, to rules to protect against fraudulent SIM swaps, and a new voluntary IoT cybersecurity labeling program, to continuing enforcement activity under the CP&I framework and establishing a new cybersecurity and privacy task force. That's a lot. Can you discuss some of these trends at the FCC?
Sure, of course. So FCC is taking a lot and breaking some grounds here, but we're hopeful that they will continue to leverage the expertise within the FCC, but also outside the FCC, because there are a lot of subject matter expertise within other parts of the US government, like CISA, like NIST, and others. And among all these FCC activities, we are very supportive and the most excited about this, the IoT security, the Cyber Trust Mark program that the US government, the White House, the FCC just launched last month. And then just maybe step back, the history of that is really since 2016 when the botnet attacks received a lot of national attention, IoT security become a priority for both the government and the industry. So counting back, I think the past 6 or 7 years, there has been a lot of activities from the industry side working very closely with NIST and other US government to develop a set of capabilities and labeling criteria and other related guidance on IoT security. So all of these activities are happening at the same time, but at the international level, the UK, Singapore, and EU, they all have IoT security exercise going on as well. So we are very excited that last month, the White House launched this effort. So, but maybe for the audience sake, I can just quickly say what is this program? So the idea is that when a consumer is going to the store, hopefully sometime next year, the idea is that they will see this binary label to empower consumers to make informed security decisions at the time of purchase through either a physical label or electronic label, so maybe like a QR code. So through that, they can decide which devices they can buy that based on security. So this is a very exciting effort, and like many others in the industry, we want to collectively raise that security bar. But at the same time, consumer education and awareness is so important to make sure the program can be successful. So I think we're a little bit early to tell, but this will be a challenging exercise. But if done well, we are optimistic that this could really help reduce the risk in the connected ecosystem. So we definitely are supportive of it.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Alexa. So what about you, Jason Olson? Can you talk about some of these trends at the FCC regarding IoT security program or SIM swaps? Like Alexa said, it's exciting, this effort to educate consumers. But what trends are you seeing at the FCC?
It's incrementally getting a little more busy at the FCC on cyber. And you don't have BGP in there, and that's a big one right now. I won't talk about individual dockets. There's lots of proceedings that we can go through that, but I would like to emphasize the private-public nature of cybersecurity, and we'd like to continue that going forward. So whatever the issue is, AT&T has a long history of working with the FCC on this, but I still think I think it's still best to leverage the private-public partnership around voluntary norms and actions on these security issues.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And we see, a recurring theme throughout these panels today has been the importance of public-private partnerships. So we talked about what the FCC is keeping an eye on. The federal government is also keeping an eye on many of the emerging technologies. And so we've talked about some of these at Mobile World Congress this year. But I want to see if we could talk, and I'll start with you, Alexa, about an emerging technology that's developing today and its implications on the telecommunications sector.
So I am keeping an eye on PQC, the post-quantum crypto. We are supportive of the ongoing NIST efforts for standardizing PQC standards by 2024. But there's a lot of questions about it. I'm sure many of you know quantum computers, they can bring a lot of positive benefits to the society, but at the same time, they can also be exploited by malicious actors. So how do we protect it? So having the standards in place is only the first steps, and we are watching two issues closely. The first one is global harmonization. We encourage our NIST colleagues to work diligently to ensure that the NIST standard can become the global standards for PQC. Also, at the same time, we encourage them to start socializing or at least promote the NIST PQC standards to our allies and partners. So when the standards are done, this could become the one that everybody needs to follow. And the second one issue is the timing of the transition. I think many of us are thinking about, yes, how do we make the transition? And really the timing is really the key, because it's unlikely that by 2024, the industry can just magically start to do transition immediately. We absolutely need the US government's guidance on this. How do we we may face a lot of challenges in the process on implementation. So how do we mitigate them? So this will really require the public-private partnership, like Jason just mentioned earlier.
Yes, excellent. Jason Boswell, do you want to touch on the transition to post-quantum cryptography?
I think whatever the timeline is, the time to start is now. That's the takeaway, I think, right? There's a lot of debate about how long do we really have, how long will it really take, but while we're talking, time is moving, right? So it's really important, and I would say to get started, but actually we have gotten started. You know, there's been a lot of thought leadership put out this year already by the Comm Sector Coordinating Council, right, on PQC and its impact on the communications sector. There's also this week, GSMA published a paper on what's the kind of global impact of PQC and quantum security, and what is a quantum safe network and quantum adaptability and all these different terms. What do they really mean, right? So that effort has gotten started. I think it still is going to take some push, like Alexis said, from government so that industry kind of is ensured that it's doing the right thing. You know, kind of like keep going, keep moving, you know, and that may take incentives as well, because nothing moves the needle like a little bit of incentive from the government too. So we got to go faster. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So going faster, right, and moving faster to make sure that we're implementing. Todd and Jason Olson, either of you want to touch on an emerging technology or post-quantum?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by objecting that the rest of the panel got post-quantum before the crypto guy.
That doesn't seem fair. No.
It's just not fair. Yeah, so this is absolutely probably the biggest thing on our radar. We can handle 6G, we'll be fine. But post-quantum cryptography, yeah, so NIST has done their part for at least the first round. We're really concerned about what it means in the real world, and once we get out there, you know, how many IoT devices are going to take a key that's 10,000 times the size of the one today? So we have to look at how it's actually going to be deployed. But to Jason's point, we're also trying to follow that CSF 2.0 approach of let's take inventory of what's going on right now, because I can bet an awful lot of money that you don't know all the certificates in use in your network today.
That's right.
So we had better find out what's out there so know what we have to go fix in the future. And so that's a big piece of our approach. And at the same time, making certain that we're building solutions that are post-quantum crypto ready. And if nothing else, making certain that we work with partners that have that firmly in their eyesight as well. So, yeah.
Excellent, excellent.
I won't talk about post-quantum because there was somebody from AT&T's Chief Security Office at another panel who talked about quantum. You know, whenever I think about emergency technologies, I think about our network. I mean, the network is always at the forefront of what I'm thinking, and it's whether it's the, you know, whatever the issue is, the availability of my network is the key. So, you know, whatever the threat is, whatever the opportunity is for managing it, you know, I think the availability of the network is the most important part of our Chief Security Office's job. And then I think one other thing, you know, kind of going forward is you know, AT&T is still working on Open RAN issues. So through the Open RAN Alliance, the Open RAN software community, the Open RAN Policy Coalition, which my boss runs, is we're still working as we develop into the next variations of the Gs, that Open RAN technology is going to be an important part of that, and ensuring that when you bring, you know, 90 vendors in to do a network, that we can do it safely.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've talked about post-quantum. I don't think that we can conclude a panel without discussing AI. So I'm wondering if folks want to take a few minutes just to talk about AI's impact on the telecommunications sector. And Jason Boswell, I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, let me kind of take it like a holistic view, you know, because really what I heard there is not just AI, but what's next, right? We're always looking for the what's next at a show like this. So that what's next isn't a thing. You know, we can look ahead and say, well, what's next? Well, 6G, okay, or 5G advanced, depending on your flavor of how you want to label it, right? But what that network looks like is really compelling. That will be a quantum AI-enabled, hyper-open, extreme API-driven 6G network trademark. That's what it's going to be. It's all of those things put together, right? You mentioned the importance of Open RAN, right? That's really, I think, not just the Open RAN, opening of the RAN itself, but the opening of the whole network. It's really a shift in mindset, which we're really trying to embrace at Ericsson, is that shift to an open API-driven ecosystem. By opening up the network, not just the individual components, but opening up the interfaces, the APIs, it allows you so much more visibility to go do different things in your network, not just you to go do them. You can amplify it now. You can have a whole army of people help you do something because maybe that particular app, you know, it's a performance-driven app, or it's a security app, it's maybe something on beamforming. Who knows what somebody's gonna create that's the next big thing, right? If we don't open it up, we may not get that next big thing. So that's why I think all of those things are really important. You know, yeah, we've got to be quantum safe on the network. It's got to be AI-driven, but it's got to be open and all of the other buzzwords that go with that together. So then how do we make it work together, to be interoperable, right? You and I were talking about this last night even, right, with the API level in the network, on network functions. You can't do that in a vacuum, because ultimately that has to feed into something else. So that's where AI comes in, is to help that interface feed in to where is the actionable data for some other platform to take it and run with it, right? That's where we'll get the exponential growth that we really need to help kind of monetize and continue this momentum with 5G.
Yes, excellent.
Don't forget the trademark on that really long acronym, by the way.
Right.
Just kidding.
Jason Olson, Alexa?
I will just quickly add that it's just, AI is such a hot topic everywhere now, but there's so many aspects of AI. You can talk about ethical aspects of it, the transparency aspect, the explainability of it, but one focus on mostly is on the security, the risk of AI. And really we have to give applause for the NIST colleagues this year. They just finished this AI risk management framework, so it at least create a common taxonomies. How do we even talk about the risk of AI? And internally, we're working very hard to trying to align that with our internal practices as well. So certainly that is a welcome first step. So going forward, we hope that this could become some kind of international framework based on the NIST AI risk management framework.
Excellent.
I'll leave it at that.
Great. Okay, so I've really enjoyed the discussion. I think we've all learned a lot here, and I know our audience has too. So I think we'll pause the discussion here. But I want to thank everyone for being here, and thank you for your time, and really appreciate you sticking around for our Promoting Security in a 5G World panel. Thank you.